Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for your presentation. You touched on two important points that I think need and deserve more reflection, maybe not in this webinar, but in the future. The first one is really the role of social media in Tunisia in supporting Qais Said. Even before the coup happened, I was in Tunisia for 6 months when, you know, literally hundreds and thousands of fake accounts were used to bombard social media, you know, on a daily basis, to praise Qais Said and to portray democracy as a failure, and the parliament as a failure, and all the political parties as a failure, and, you know, all of that. It was a very consistent message that was started for about 6 or 7 months before the coup and continues to this day. You know, it's very well organized, it's very well funded, and it has impact. It creates this environment where people think, oh, okay, that's the public opinion, that's what all the Tunisians think, that, you know, and then people tend to follow that public opinion if you hear it, you know, 100 times a day. And as you know, in Tunisia, everybody is on Facebook. But I do take issue with the validity of opinion polls in Tunisia right now, because of the environment of fear that exists in Tunisia today, that Abdelrazak has spoken about and Said has spoken about. People are afraid. And these polls, they go to people's homes, you know, conducted by other Tunisians who they don't know who they are, they've never met before, asking them, do you support Qais Said or not? Or do you support political parties? Or do you support Ennahda? You know, in a democracy, yes, people would be able and willing to say what they really believe. But I don't think that exists anymore. I don't think in Tunisia today, people are safe, you know, if they say that they are against Qais Said or that they support a particular opposition party, Ennahda or otherwise. So I think there is a new environment in Tunisia that really makes these polling that is being conducted, I think, a lot less reliable than, you know, they used to be, you know, in you know, before the coup.
Well, let me respond very quickly to that.
Sure.
So you're right on the media campaign, but I don't think the media campaign created the perceptions we're talking about. They magnified them. They didn't create them. They existed before these media campaigns.
Some of it. Yes.
And second of all, the polls have been consistent before this moment of increasing terrorism or terror emerged. The polls have been quite consistent for months and months and months. I don't think it's the fear factor. The polls that I'm seeing are very reliable, and the results have been consistent over time. So that would suggest that it's not a consequence of the present environment. And I think the political elite, if I may be just perfectly frank, is not doing itself any favor by minimizing the extent to which there is disillusionment with the political parties. I mean, I understand how hard this is to absorb. I understand how difficult it is to reconcile oneself with those realities. But I think that there is a natural human impulse to sort of question the viability of these polls, but I think they're actually quite reliable. I've seen the methodology. I wish they'd be published, but they really show us that what we've known now for the last 2 years.
But then the methodology is they go to people's homes.
Well, you know, but they were doing
That's
that.
the methodology.
They were doing that before the campaign, this campaign was
okay, and
that's a function of something that happened over a period of years, and not just in the last year or two. This is.
But do you think that right now in February or in March, if you go to a Tunisian in the street or in his home and ask him, do you support Qais Said or not, or do you support Ennahda or any particular opposition party, do you think you will get an
actually
answer?
Quite the reverse, Radwan? The polls show us that there was declining support for the president over the last 8 months, not increasing, and that should suggest that people actually are expressing their point of view. So I simply don't agree with you. I think that, and again, I think if you're trying to sort of talk your way around these polls, you're not really focusing on the problem at hand, which is the absence of a kind of popular groundswell, even in the middle class that's harassed, that's struggling every day to get through the day. I understand it, but there's something much deeper going on that needs to be, I think needs to be addressed and not simply ignored.
Okay,
If
well,
I just may,
yes, go
if
ahead,
I may
Said.
just about this actually, because there were also polls that says during, the power grab or the early months of the power grab that the president was at 80%, 90% of popular support, even though people were queuing for bread and they couldn't even find, basic needs, to survive. And this idea that the president is at 80%, 90%, and then he's organizing, suspending a constitutional process, organizing a referendum, and then a referendum is supported by a quarter of the population, assuming that the numbers of the EZ are accurate, and there are reasonable grounds to believe they are not, that doesn't also match up with the reality of that perceived support. A president who has the support of 80 or 90% of the population who organize presidential parliamentarian election only for 10% or 11% of the population to turn around. That also doesn't match with that kind of narrative of polls. So we can look at whatever polls and methodology. I think we need just to focus on the actual figures and the numbers actually of people of the referendum or of the parliamentarian elections that were organized. And if anyone look at those numbers and believe that the Tunisian people give mandates to the president to overhaul the political system, or that parliamentarian or that parliament has any kind of democratic legitimacy, then there is something wrong about our understanding of democracy. So we have been criticizing a parliament that was elected by 50% or 45% of the population. And somehow now a parliament that is elected by 11% is more legitimate than the previous parliament. I understand the narrative about people dissatisfied about democracy in general, not only political parties, but especially political parties. That dissatisfaction is associated with the fact that whatever you can say about the Tunisian democracy over the past 10 years and freedom of expression, it never translated in the kind of economic reform or economic growth that would have an impact on the life of the population. And you compare the mass protests in Israel with the GDP by citizen of 50,000, with a situation in Tunisia of GDP by capita of 3,000. There is nothing there that Tunisians gain from democracy that they would have go to the streets right now and protest and call for. And them not being in the streets is not because they are supporting the president, it's not because they are happy with what's happening in the country right now. Them not being in the streets is just because they have basic life needs that they are dealing with on a daily basis without any kind of political.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Said said. I mean, everything he says, I agree with. I mean, there are lots of very compelling reasons. And the fact is that there isn't massive support for the president. And at whatever point it was, it just already declined. I'm simply saying that that is a different question from asking whether people are mobilizing with a view of saving a set of institutions which a lot of Tunisian population wasn't heavily invested in. It's a somewhat different question, isn't it?
Okay, let's go to the questions. So we have one question in chat. Do we know who is funding the pro-Said activity online? Have you seen any studies or reports? I mean, of course, there are suspicions, but have you seen any reports linking about this social media campaign? Has anybody seen it?
I can just, like, one concrete example, actually, that's the attacks against judges and prosecutors. That you have Facebook accounts that would be just dropping information that is coming from case files. The case of the female judge that was accused of adultery. And you have the medical report of that judge being published in pro-president's Facebook account. There was a prosecutor actually who was investigating that kind of activity. And unfortunately, he's also one of the prosecutors that were dismissed. So it's, you have that element that, that there is a conflict, that, security services are fighting with judges or prosecutors, and there are information that are protected by the instruction or secrets of the instructions that are thrown in these Facebook accounts. It was investigated. Unfortunately, the investigation didn't go to, or that the person who was behind it was amongst the prosecutors who were dismissed. And then there is the whole narrative and you compare it on the 25th of July with what happened in Tunisia, just compare it to what happened when there was also the coup in Egypt, and how that narrative and how those votes and how those social media accounts with the same message that this is against, this is not a coup, this is a revolution, or like a reforming a revolution, and that we are getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood or infiltrated the state, etc., etc. So there are, comparisons there, but unless you are conducting, the kind of thorough audits, digitally, and also investigations, because as I said, some of the information that is being used about prosecutions or about individual cases can only come up from certain stakeholders. Like, if it's medical report of a judge that is being accused of adultery and you find it on a Facebook account, there aren't a million people who have access to that medical report. This is something protected by the secret, by the investigation. So who is the institution behind, leaking such information, always in furtherance of whatever message the president is advancing when it comes to combating judicial corruption.
Yeah, it seems very coordinated. And there's almost pattern that is involved. The president will say something, he'll hint at what he wants, right? A certain character. He often won't name a name. He'll just make an allusion to somebody. And then suddenly there's all this information on the internet about this person, right? And then once that's out, the prosecutors come in and say, well, there's, you don't need a lot of coordination to get this kind of coordination going, but it definitely seems pretty systematic and pretty effective. It's not haphazard. You've got strange web pages based in Miami. I mean, all kinds of weird things are going on, but the level of cooperation and coordination that it's not haphazard. It seems to be pretty systematic.
Yeah. Abdrazak, do you have an answer to that question about the social media campaigns? You're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Abdrazak, we can't hear you. You're still muted. Okay, good.
Donc, for me, the most dangerous thing in this discussion is that the Qais Said is using the law about terrorists, which is an exceptional law to persecute the opponent. You are in your home and you don't know if the night you will be attacked by the police of Qais Said or not. So the attacks are committed in the night while you are with your family and your family. So our fighting, I think, now is to establish the state of law, because Tunisia now hasn't the condition to be a state. Because the only law which is dominate now is one person, the law of one person, which call it Qais Said. As I would ask about a judge. If you know, there is a judge who's called Bashir Akrami, who is a judge anti-terrorist. And this judge has worked as instruction judge for the most dangerous cases, which are the attack terrorist of Bardo Museum and Hotel Imperial in Sousse in 2015, if you remember. And the scandal now, there is a scandal now because this judge now is arrested, and he is judges on base of the law of terrorists because of the work which has done. This work which has done was on the control of the other judges of the degree of judges, control of the appeal chamber, control of the cassation chamber. So it's very strange now that we are accused judges who has done his job. And I think that it's a very strange thing that we are living in Tunisia. Also, we have 14 lawyers who passed before instruction judge, and they are prohibited to travel now because of cases in the relation of their job as a lawyer. So I think that Tunisia has signed conventions about human rights, and Qais Said, who is a lawyer, who is a professor of lawyer, has to know that Tunisia has to respect these conventions. And when he consider any contact, for example, with a stranger, with diplomatic, as a crime, as you know, for example, Ridab al-Haj, who is a colleague of mine, and Ghazi Shawashi was with me when we have participated in last November, to a side event in the United Nations in Geneva, and he is arrested because their contact with the diplomatic, with the stranger. So the situation is very dangerous, I think, in Tunisia, and we call to the fighter for justice, for human rights, to be with Tunisia now, to stop this tragedy.
Okay, we have 3 more questions which we're gonna take together and try to finish in the next 8 or 9 minutes. So the first question is by Mr. Monsef Khaddar. The independence of the judiciary is important and necessary, but how to frame the debate beyond the dominant liberal democratic conception model? Thank you. And then the second question is from Anne Moisan. If the IMF continues to stall on the loan, who might the president turn to? Which autocrat? And the third question, also by Anne Moisan, is: has President Said not learned from other successful autocratic disinformation campaigns? Is that what we are seeing, both with selected targeted internal and external audiences? So each one of you has the floor, 2 minutes or so to answer these questions, either together or whichever question you want to answer. We'll start with you, Dan.
Yeah, well, I'm somebody who's a firm believer that the international standards of democracy and liberalism, and that, and while I respect cultural and local traditions, I think that we have to maintain those standards. And so I'm not sure I would say that there is necessarily an alternative framework, because I think the framework is universal. And if we lose that commitment, we've lost democracy. Having said that, I think the problem is not the need for a framework, but the problem of how one mobilizes, and this is a problem we study a lot in political science, how one mobilizes how one links political leaders to followings and organic support in ways that give them leverage to negotiate. I think that's the issue here. But I wouldn't suggest there's an alternative framework, because once you start doing that, you go down the slippery slide of really providing prescriptions which end up being authoritarian. So I don't favor that. I would also say that the 2 other things on first of all on the sort of mass media campaign, it's very effective in drawing lines and intimidating people and scaring people. So you don't need to arrest. You can make exemplary arrests of a bunch of people. This is not going to be the Egyptian model where they toss 30 or 40,000 people into prison, but it's in a smaller country like Tunisia can be very effective. That's a very sad reality. And finally, of course, there are lots of autocrats that the president can turn to. He's been talking to the leaders of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, China. I mean, there are ways around the IMF deal if there are actors in the region and beyond who want to support him. And I'm not surprised to see that he's been energetically pursuing some of these alternatives, including perhaps China, because he would, if possible, to get a get out of jail free card, and that could be partly it. So that unfortunately is a reality that plays into his favor.
But also important to add, Dan, that he's been pursuing these other autocrats for a year and a half right now, very unsuccessfully so far.
That's true, and maybe there won't be a success, but it's interesting to see some. There's lots of things going on in the region right now, and it's possible that he will still get some of the support that he's looking for, but maybe not. In which case, then he'll have to turn to the IMF, and that, as I said before, I think everybody recognizes what happens if he does actually sign the deal and then acts to make it happen. Opens up lots of possibilities, but I could easily see the president trying to find other sources of income, even if they had failed previously. I just think it's a predictable avenue for him to pursue.
Okay. Sir Abdelrazak.
Well, I would speak about the phenomenon of Qais Said. Qais Said used a speech, a popular speech, and this populist speech, yes, and this populist speech make people have dreams. When I think that the popular of Qais Said is digressing, is قاعدة تنقص, because people now are discovering that Qais Said hasn't any project, and realize it that Qais Said don't give them anything, because their situation, their social economic situation is very bad now, after near 3 years that Qais Said has all the powers, near all the powers. So I think that this popular will decrease, voila. And when the people realize this fact, I think that they will make Qais Said going out. And I think in the prison, not out, but in the prison.
Thank you, Sir Abdelrazak. Saeed, you have the final word.
Sorry for my English, not very. Okay. I have to an effort, but sorry for my nearly English.
No, it's okay. It's clear.
It's great, Mr. Kilani. Thanks so much. I think first thing, like the independence of the judiciary as liberal concept, or as some Facebook accounts, also pro-side, talking about it as a Western concept, and the West lecturing us about judicial independence. The right to an independent judiciary is a universal human right. Tunisia accepted conventions that guarantee the right to an independent judiciary, whether it's international covenants on political and civil rights, whether the African Union instruments, and there are decisions from the African courts, and there are decisions from the Human Rights Committee and other bodies that reiterate that Tunisia is bound by its obligations to ensure the independence of the judiciary, and the independence of the judiciary means an institutional independence and a situation in which the president cannot interfere with the judiciary, cannot appoint and dismiss judges as well as he is doing right now. Tunisia accepted these conventions, accepted these commitments and obligations under international law. It must comply with them, and you must respect them. And you must enforce the decision also of the African court on the states of exception. On the IMF and the judiciary, I think, again, honestly, I don't know who is stalling, whether it's the president or the IMF right now. If you hear Western capitals, they are all pushing the president to sign that IMF deal. So something to and even without any conditions or without linking that signature to any kind of political reforms or the end of the subordination of the judiciary to the executive or the release of political prisoners. So it's difficult to see, at this stage whether it's the IMF who is stalling. It's rather, I believe, it's the president who is not willing to sign this. And again, what's the outcome? No one knows, but the financial situation is dire. I think it's important also for the international community to not look at this IMF deal or to situation in Tunisia only through the lens of security, migration. It is important to ensure that the democratic experiment that survived in Tunisia for 10 years is reestablished, and it can be only reestablished if there are checks and balances in the country, and there is not the one-man rule that is established right now. And I think just looking at linking that to the situation of the judiciary, whether the IMF can give loans to the country if the judiciary is independent, I think they are happy giving loans to Egypt, and the judiciary there, it's worse than what we are seeing right now in Tunisia, with judges issuing massive penalties without any fair trial guarantees. So again, if those institutions and if those state members that are willing to promote the rule of law and still consider that the path for Tunisia is democracy, it's important to link any kind of financial support to concrete reforms on rule of law, checks and balances, separation of power, and judicial independence in Tunisia.
Thank you very much. This was a very, I think, a gloomy, webinar and discussion, but it reflects reality, and I think it's been very informative to understand what's really going on in Tunisia and the extent of the crisis in Tunisia. Thank you, Dan, Abdelrazak, and Saeed for joining us in this webinar, and thanks to everyone who participated. And hopefully we will see you in the future, and in better days.
Let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
باي باي.
Bye bye.
شاي طيبة.
شاي طيبة. شاي طيبة.
طيبة. إلى اللقاء.